Daniel Horowitz. This guy stands guard on the Constitution and our money and our medicine and everything else 24/7. Daniel, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing all right, Glenn, but it's deja vu once again.
Yeah. So, first of all, is there any bright side to what is happening with the budget?
Well, I mean, I guess they're planning on cutting a few $100 billion, so it's better than nothing. Although it should be pointed out that Republicans are going to spend another few $100 billion that I think we all say we want: the military, immigration enforcement, and then $4.5 trillion to extend the tax cuts. There's another $2 trillion to enact Trump's new proposed tax cuts, which I think we shouldn't treat as spending, but do remember in the short term we do have to print more money to deal with the deficit. And I think this is the overall problem that Republicans always get themselves into. When Democrats are in power, we all sound the same. Oh, it's terrible, Biden inflation, look what they're doing. But then when Republicans get in, we're not on the same page, and they don't understand the mutual exclusivity of their arguments. This is literally Obamacare 2.0. They hated Obamacare, except they loved the aspects of it that made it expensive. So same thing here. Everyone hates inflation, except they don't want to actually reform or cut anything that's driving it. And right now, we're at a point where we cannot achieve our parents' standard of living right now. It is that bad. According to BLS, we're spending, a family of four is about $15,000 more a year than pre-COVID. Remember, the average family got about $11,000 in stimulus checks. That sounded nice. But they're now paying $15,000 more every single year. Oh, and I forgot to tell you that over the next 10 years, there will be $89 trillion in spending, $22 trillion in deficits, and that assumes that there won't be a recession, 2.8% sustained growth, no wars, and no disasters. So that's what we're facing now.
That's unsustainable. I mean, here's what nobody is talking about. First of all, the spending will lead to more inflation. We have got to get the spending under control. We also have to cut the regulation. We have to cut taxes and make them better than any place else in the world. We have to get serious, or we are at at the doorstep of the funeral home. We're already there. We're walking towards the casket. You cannot keep funding our debt. No one wants our debt anymore. And so interest rates on the debt are already at $1 trillion a year. If we don't change our course, it'll be 1.5, 2 trillion, 3 trillion a year. And then it's an out of control death spiral.
No, exactly. And people forget at the very time where we have record treasuries to offload on the market, the new ones, but also, a third of our existing debt is rolling over at higher rates. Precisely at that time, there's decreased demand. Central banks are buying up gold. China and Japan are moving away from our treasuries. So we could set the federal funds rate to zero all we want, but at the end of the day, the treasuries, the yields are moving in the opposite direction. So I think Republicans have a golden opportunity, unlike a generation ago where people didn't see the pain. It was a futuristic thing. And let's face it, no one cares about their kids and grandkids, even though they say they do. But this is a now problem. And I think Republicans have failed to communicate and complete their sentences that what is causing the current and future inflation are these very programs. So when they say, oh, well, I don't want to cause any pain to my district, the pain of the cost of living is greater than the amount of subsidies they're getting in welfare. They got to be honest. But I'll tell you, Glenn, this notion that there is this free pot of trillions of so-called waste, fraud, and abuse divorced from significantly devolving, reforming, or cutting major programs is simply not true.
Yes.
We're lying to ourselves, and we're setting us up for failure.
Well, that's, the one hope that I have, because I'm seeing the cuts, and we're not anywhere close to $1 trillion, and we should be cutting about $2 trillion. At bare minimum, we should be cutting $2 trillion from the budget, and not over 10 years, over this year, or we're just not going to make it. The one thing that I do have hope for is that maybe we're going to start really shutting down agencies, which is not going to cut $2 trillion, but it will begin to make significant impacts toward $1 trillion and $2 trillion. We've found all of the DEI stuff. We're not going to find, $500 billion in that. We're just not.
Sure.
And we're not going to find, things like USAID. We're not going to find those everywhere. I was a little disappointed in the statement from the Pentagon yesterday that we're not going to make cuts. We're going to reinvest. We have to make cuts in everything. Everything. There cannot be a sacred cow.
No, and especially if you want to fulfill the president's promise to kind of wall off Social Security and Medicare, you could do that, but then you really, really have to go aggressive on education, housing, transportation. It should all be state and local function. And then obviously Medicaid and food stamps. Trump's message, if I were him, would be, look, we're going to get rid of the foreign labor that's driving down wages, get the 4.5 million Americans that are out of the labor force, working age, come back, join our economy, lower regs, lower taxes, but we are going to ease off welfare. There is no shortcut to that message. You need wholesale healthcare reform, the way we approach healthcare. See, the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid is not a bug, but a feature. It's the third-party grifting.
Yes.
The middleman. We got to cut out the middleman. But if you want to maintain the current structure, the notion that you could have painless, condoms in Gaza causing inflation, that's not it. Those are policy problems. Foreign aid is a policy problem. Illegal immigration is a policy problem that does have a fiscal cost, but that's not fundamentally where the money is. And I think some people are being very dishonest and they're setting themselves up for failure. Hence, when Republicans come to actually craft a budget, we can't even get them on board for $1.5 trillion in cuts over 10 years.
Donald Trump asked yesterday, I believe it was, for a balanced budget. He said, I want a balanced budget. And this is so far away from a balanced budget. I wish he would start pushing the political nuclear buttons on members of Congress. He has the clout right now. He has the nation's attention, and he has the attention of the GOP. They know the Mitch McConnells in the world have no power left. It's all gone to Donald Trump. Now is the time to start saying, Congress, I'm going to explain to the American people that you can't find these cuts. You have to find these cuts now. He needs to step up to the table and be the Donald Trump that he's being everywhere else. Why isn't he?
This to me was the one black hole that we saw in the first administration, where he'll signal in the executive branch, and not just signal, but starting to implement this vision that we're talking about. The cuts to the federal workforce reflect this sort of vision.
Yes.
But then what he needs to do is then connect the dots to legislative affairs and make it clear that this is the budget I want to come up beside it. And then he's got to threaten primaries against those guys, not the Freedom Caucus guys, because what winds up happening is the opposite. He kind of leaves it to Congress. Well, if you leave it to them, the bad guys
never going to change. Yep.
Yeah, so then they come to him and say, oh, I got a deal, and then the Freedom Caucus balks at it, and he yells at them. That's got to change, because otherwise they're about to fund so many of the things that he started to cut.
Which is why, we won't survive if he doesn't, and the time to do it is right now, push Congress up against a wall. Because the minute he leaves in 3 years and 11 months, the minute he leaves, And if we lose to somebody who is not the same mindset, all this stuff is over. It's just reversed. And the country cannot take these swings this far back and forth.
No, absolutely not. And part of the reason why we are where we are is because Republicans always had pay-go. They always said they have offsets. But what they would do is when they're in power, they would backload the savings and front-load the increased deficit spending or, whether it's tax cuts or whatever. And then Democrats inevitably come in, erase that with interest, and you're left with the bad and not the good. So, this is why you either have to front-load the cuts or at least front-load structural reforms or devolution to the states in a way that makes it harder for Democrats to claw back. One quick idea I'd love to pitch is, Trump doesn't want to deal with the debt ceiling. One way to deal with that is devolve it to the states. And Congress pass a law that, okay, we're going to increase the debt ceiling now, but the next time you need 2/3 of the state legislatures to do it.
They'll never do it.
So that would bring the fight to the grassroots in the red states and finally make us make those decisions. Yes, Democrats could come in and claw that back, but once you give that to the states, it's a lot harder to do. We need enduring victories this time.
Yeah, we do. All right, hang on just a sec, 'cause I want to ask you a little bit about the regulations that are being cut. Are we cutting there deep enough, fast enough? Because Trump, I want success for America, and I believe in his plan. But it's not going to happen if we can't turn the economy back on. The economy is, we took a wrecking ball to it for the last 4 years. We were intentionally shooting it in the chest. We've got to make some bold moves. And I want to talk to you about regs. And honestly, why are we just going for these tax cuts and saying, yeah, we're going to make these permanent? Why aren't we going for the 15-15-15 plan that was talked about? So, Daniel, I don't know if you're following the cuts in regulations, et cetera, but have you seen any plan yet for deep cuts in regulations?
So again, I think much like with the federal workforce and the programs, a lot of this is the bigger, more transformational change that you're going to do. It ultimately requires Congress. I'm thinking of things like, first of all, the entirety of the Green New Deal, but things like the 2005 Energy Policy Act, all this misallocation of resources, the ethanol stuff. The global warming needs to be extirpated from the government. That is really what is killing our economy. So what Republicans have done until now is this sort of hybrid where yes to drilling, oil, gas, but at the same time, we're going to indulge this global warming lie and subsidize this alternative economy that crowds out real energy sources. So you get a
Wait a minute, Stu. Give me that stat you gave me earlier today on you dismiss this green energy movement. Look at the growth.
This is unbelievable. Since 2000, we have gone
from 2000
76.8% of our energy from fossil fuels
in 2000
to 76.5%. So we've improved 0.3%, Daniel.
Don't call that a scam.
Yeah, but we've crowded out. You can imagine the hundreds of billions of dollars of misallocated resources.
Yeah.
So this is another big issue that Trump promised to get rid of the Green New Deal. Why is that not in budget reconciliation? It passed through budget reconciliation to begin with, garbage in, garbage out. But I'll tell you, Republicans, a lot of these guys love it in their districts. Well, I got a electric vehicle plant or some sort of solar panel transmission line. And nobody wants to sacrifice anything for a net good.
We have seen 30 days of what I think has been miraculous in our country. I've never seen a president move this fast. I've never seen it, anything like it. But we're now to the point to where the rubber it has to meet the road on significant changes. And Donald Trump knows this. He told me I have 100 days to get all of this working because if I don't, the economy isn't going to turn around by the midterms, and that'll kill us. He's like, I have to have the economy turned around. And the only way to do that is to make massive cuts. or the inflation's just going to keep going higher and higher and higher, and massive regulations and massive taxes. I mean, I think the Republicans think that it's a smorgasbord where they can pick and choose. No. All of this is one meal. If you don't have all of this, it's not going to work. Am I wrong?
No, that's a brilliant point, and I think this is where Republicans have failed. They've done 6 rounds of tax cuts. So, since Reagan, every time they come in, we're going to cut taxes, but they forget the other half.
Right.
Now we're paying the piper. Back then we were kind of like a young teenager where your metabolism could chew it up, and we were able to get away with it for a while, eat that $230 billion in annual interest on the debt, and for the last 15 years before COVID, we had pretty low inflation. That is over with. And this is a now issue, and to me, there's really actually 4 legs to it. So the regulatory, the taxes, the spending cuts, and I do think, and Trump could do this executively, we need to wean off foreign labor. So at the same time, you're telling Americans we're going to, wean them off of welfare, and also think about all these federal workers. A lot of agencies are going to have computer techs that are cut. You try finding a job where every company only hires an Indian.
Daniel Horowitz, thank you.